Let's stay with the festive season theme. While some people mull over the idea of a Christmas lunch, others are uncertain whether they'll even have a single meal, let alone a prepared lunch. It's estimated that 18 to 19 million South Africans go to bed hungry every day. Chefs with Compassion is a South African charity that cooks meals for the needy, often organizing large community feedings, including Christmas lunches, using fresh donated produce and dry goods to fight hunger, especially for senior and vulnerable groups during this holiday period. Let's speak more about this and bring in Coovashan Pillay, the director at Chefs with Compassion, who joins us now via our video link. Chef Pillay, great to have you on the program. Thanks very much indeed for making time. This is one of the many positive Christmas messages we look forward to, given the incredible work that the organization that you represent actually does. Speak to us about, I suppose, what kind of focus you'll have on this time around, given, as I mentioned, how many people are still desperate for any meal, let alone a Christmas lunch around this time of the year.
Yeah, good morning, Ayanda, and thank you for having me. Yeah, the festive cheer is definitely in the air, and this is what this time's all about. It's a time for giving, it's a time for sharing. But as you mentioned, this is a very critical step that we have in this country, where 18 to 19 million people go to bed hungry on a daily basis. But at the same time, on a yearly basis, we have approximately 10 million tons of produce actually going to waste. And that's food that's either overproduced or a lack of demand from retailers, and it ends up onto the landfill. So we have two major problems. We've got a very high food waste issue, but at the same time, we have people that do not have access to this food. And that's what organizations like Chefs with Compassion and many others do on a daily basis, is to try and lower that gap and bridge that gap and ensure that people do have access to that food. And unfortunately, it is a bit sad during this festive time, is that people are looking forward to just a meal, let alone a luxurious Christmas meal, but just having a meal and having that sustenance on Christmas Day.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the point you've just made, Chef Pillay. The country is not dealing with a food crisis as I think most people would understand it. There is actually enough food to go around. Our distribution channels are just not great at making sure that the people who need the food can actually get it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is where, Chefs with Compassion has the three value system or the pillars that we work towards, and that's rescue, cook, and feed. And more often than not, when I say to people that we rescue produce, we actually don't take food from the bins. This is good produce just going to waste. And like I said earlier, it's either from an over manufacturing or lack of demand or produce from farms that are not being sold at the market. And that's good produce that goes to waste. And as you can see from the pictures, these are food that's being rescued from manufacturers and the markets. So it's good food going to waste. And we don't have a problem with if we can just channel that to the right hands and to the right homes, and ensuring that people have access to these ingredients.
Yeah, my understanding is that the organization was actually established in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, where, of course, the concerns around food insecurity were heightened. I wonder if you can tell us what you've discovered since then about, the people who essentially need your kind of services, even beyond, of course, the pandemic.
Yeah, so I am a chef. I'm in the hospitality industry, and this was kind of highlighted to me during the pandemic. We've always had this issue in this country, but obviously we were never exposed to it until the pandemic happened. And as you know, a lot of industries were affected, and the hospitality industry being one of them, where we came to a complete standstill, where restaurants, hotels, takeaways, and all food service channels were shut down. And that's where we saw the need, where people became vulnerable, people lost their jobs, people lost their income, and needed access to food. And that's how we then started doing some research and actually found where all this food is actually ending up. And that's how we started this organization. And, since then, the world's coming back to a normality, hospitality is coming back, hotels are reopening, restaurants are picking up again. However, the need for feeding people has not stopped. And that's why we are still continuing our work. And we are still, we've got approximately, with Chefs for Compassion, we have approximately 35,000 people that have actually now become reliant on us on a daily basis for meals.
Sure. And how do you get these meals to them? Of course, you can't do it alone. I imagine you need chefs with this kind of similar, I don't know, call it idea, passion, ideology to come on board.
Absolutely. And this is why we call ourselves Chefs for Compassion, because, we make the time to serve our community. So we have a huge network of volunteers as well as service providers so firstly, we need to go out to rescue the produce, to go out to the markets, to go out to the manufacturers and get the produce. We then bring it to our share house, and the reason why we call it a share house and not a warehouse is because that's where the sharing happens, where all the beneficiaries, all of our kitchens and the cooks come through, pick up the produce, and then go to the various areas and kitchens, and then produce the meals, and then distribute it to their networks and communities within their regions. I always like to look at the positive picture to this, and this is where the chefs have a lot of fun because you don't know what you're cooking. So every day is a mystery box. So you don't have a menu plan. Your menu is planned once you know what's available at the share house, and that just keeps the creativity flowing. And some of the dishes that these chefs have made, it's not always just soup. And people think that when you're cooking for communities, it's always the mundane dishes. These are chefs behind the stoves, behind the menus that are actually creating restaurant and hotel quality meals for those in need.
Yeah. Of course, the work that you're doing, I think few people would criticize the interventions that you put through, but I wonder how you reckon organizations like Chef with Compassion could enter the debate around fixing the more structural problems that lead to hunger, right? So we know it's issues that are well documented, inequality, poverty, unemployment, et cetera, et cetera. It might be a difficult question to pose to you. I mean, you are doing what you can where you are, but I'm sure you've got your own reflections.
No, absolutely. And, Chefs of Compassion is one organization of many. And I mean, we haven't even tipped the iceberg when it comes to the food rescue produce, or the food rescue side of it. And as I said, 10 million tons of produce wasted on a yearly basis. And I think if we can, have some sort of regulation and government intervention just to stop that and turn that and redirect that into areas, especially schools. And, we have an issue with nourishment, and it's not just feeding people, but we also forget that, kids are growing up and they need the nutrition, they need the nourishment, and that also helps them to excel at school. And that also, plays a role, because when you're trying to study on an empty stomach, you can't focus. And that's, again, it's malnutrition. It affects our education system. So there's a whole cycle here that I think, as you said, we need more stakeholders to come around this table to have this conversation, because this is just the beginning of a major problem that we are going to be facing as a country.
Yeah. Shall we speak about sustainability and perhaps funding for the organization? It's great that there are a lot of people who are willing to donate this food that you are rescuing, but, there must be operational costs associated with this. Fuel, to get the food around. I suppose there might be stipends that you're paying out in some respects. How are you managing to keep up with all of that?
Well, and this is it, the food is there, it's there, it's ready to be collected. I mean, we've got the hands to cook the meals, we've got the hands to distribute the meals. But like you said, running an engine of this magnitude takes costs, and hard costs that the organization has to, fund. And that is the fuel costs of picking up, dropping off the ingredients, the volunteers that make the time to come through. So we try to give them a stipend to cover transport costs. Then we've got the utilities. We've got the utilities of the share house itself. We've got the utilities of the kitchens that are cooking, the gas usage, the electricity usage, the water usage. So this is why we ask everyday South Africans, as well as corporates, to just look into their pockets, and any contribution to help the organization and many organizations like us to continue doing the work, to support our communities in need.
Absolutely. How do people do that, quite briefly, if you can?
So you can contact us via our website, which is www.chefsforcompassion.org. chefs.cwc.org.za. You can also follow us on our social media handles, which is at Chefs with Compassion, and all of our details to donate or to make a contribution are listed on our social media platforms as well as our website.
Coovashan Pillay, thanks very much indeed for speaking to us and for the work that you do. We could all do with a bit of compassion, and not only during this time of the year, but certainly throughout the 12 months of the year as well. Really appreciate the time. Coovashan Pillay is a chef with Chefs with Compassion. In fact, he's the director of that organization.